Shaughnessy. I wanted to demonstrate a quick process using Pixinsight of a galaxy I just imaged recently. It's of M63, and I've already pulled together integrated all the color channels and the luminance channel. So all the pre-processing is done. So I assume that we'll start with the luminance frame and the RGB frames. So there's luminance, RGB. So first thing we'll do is, first thing I always do is just combine the RGB straight up so that I can get these three out of the way, the three individual channels out of the way. And then I push this to the side, and then I want to work on the luminance for now. So we see a lot of gradients here, so we want to take care of the gradients with dynamic background extraction. Actually, because I have some clipping because of the frame shifting from dithering while I was taking the image, I'm going to do a crop first. So do a dynamic crop just to trim off the edges of the frame. And I want to save this process icon to be used later for the RGB image. Okay, now we can go to the DBE, and I tend to start with a pretty broad number of points here because I know that this particular camera, I think the way that the frames were taken, it was taken in fast mode, and there's some artifacts that I want to get out with DBE. So I do a first pass like this, and then do a second pass. And there's some halo in here that I know that some of these points are overlapping, so I want to manually remove them. I want to retain that halo. We don't want the division in the dynamic background extraction to remove any of the halo. So that's one of the cool parts of this galaxy. Okay. All right. Maybe one more. One more there. Oop. One more up here. And maybe that one too. All right. And then we want to apply that. Okay. And that is after DBE. So you can still see a little bit of that banding going on, but for now this is fine. So we want to save that that stack of processes for the color. It's a bit redundant with the crop, but I think the DBE, the two different DBEs I wanted to keep for the color image. So, okay, for the luminance, one of the first things I want to do is create a luminance mask. And with this, usually I use these two in tandem, the screen transfer function and histogram transformation. I do an auto STF and apply that to the histogram transformation for this image. Turn it off and then do a preview. And this is what the histogram would look like if I applied it. And I want to black clip it a little bit and maybe soften it, something like that. And this is going to be used for my my deconvolution as well as my noise reduction. Okay, so we'll call this a luminance mask. Lum mask. Tuck this away for now. Okay, and then another thing I want is, because we'll be doing deconvolution, it takes a few parts. One is the point spread function, which we're going to get using the dynamic PSF. And we'll just click on maybe a couple dozen points here, a couple dozen stars for this process. And this frame is fairly flat, so I could pick them all over the place. But usually you want to concentrate on stars that are closest to your object. So if you want that object to get sharpened, and there's a lot of curvature in your field, then you should try and pick stars that are closer to that object. But here it probably doesn't really matter. And you want to stay away from the little tiny galaxies in the background, like I think this is probably a galaxy, so it doesn't look very point-like. Okay, so we got 22, and I'll just quickly form the PSF, and that's what I use for this piece in deconvolution. Okay, tuck that away. Alright, and then let's see, D-ringing. So we need a star mask to put into here, and this is to kind of protect the very bright stars. So we'll go into star mask. Actually, I think one thing we can do is use star net and create a star mask with this. So we'll do that. And star net takes a little while to run. But I think on this smaller chip it's not too bad. This image was taken with a telescope service ONTC 1010, so a 10-inch f4 Newtonian, brought up to 4.6 with a Paracorr, and as a sensor it used a QSI 690 with Astrodon filters. And I think I got about 5 hours of total data between Luminance and RGB. Okay, there we go. These are our stars. Something went wrong. This looks like... okay, something went wrong there. So I think what I'll do instead is do a... that's probably it. I didn't apply it to the Luminance mask. Let me just check to make sure that this would do something with a preview. I usually do previews to make sure that things work right because they're faster to compute on. Okay, yeah, it worked. Okay. All right, so we'll do it here. Create a star mask on the clone and apply. Okay, so this is our star mask that we'll use. I'll call this star mask. And tuck that away too. Alright. So for the support here, we want star mask. And we want, for the integration frame, we need the Luminance mask to be applied as a mask on this integration frame. And you can turn off the visibility of the mask so we can see what's going on. And I like to create a preview window. It's faster. Okay. And start at 15 iterations and see what happens. Okay, that seemed to sharpen it up a little bit. I'm toggling between, and it's sharpening the knots in the galaxy a little bit. The stars are getting a little bit tighter, probably not as much because of the star mask applied, but there's some tightening up of those knots in the galaxy. I can start by lowering the global dark, see if that helps. Okay. When I lower the global dark, I'm looking for dark circles around the brighter stars. And I'm starting to see maybe a hint of that. So I trade off by increasing the number of iterations to see if I can get this even tighter, those knots in the galaxy even tighter, while keeping the dark areas around the stars from getting too strong. So I'd say the dark area here is getting a little too strong, so maybe bump this up. Alright, that's a little better. Yeah, so I'm toggling between it applied and not, and it's tightening most things up pretty well. So what we can do, I'm pretty satisfied with that for a quick pass-through processing here. So we can apply that to the whole image, and it'll take a little bit because we're doing 25 iterations on the whole frame, but we should be left with a pretty well, pretty good detail on the galaxy. Okay, so we can zoom in, undo, redo, undo, redo. Looks good. Alright, so we have our deconvolution done. Now we can start to apply noise reduction. I like to do it on an inverted luminance mask. I'll just use the same one I used before, and then use this process icon with these filled parameters for multi-scale median transform. It seems to do a pretty good job at removing a lot of that noise. Okay, and I tend not to play with these too much, just to get a good leveling of that noise. So this is a before and after, and I'll zoom in a little bit, before, after. And then I'll do an auto STF with it after, and that's when you can really start to see that banding come out. I've since fixed that, but in this image it's there, unfortunately. But anyway, alright, so next step for this is just a quick little stretch. I'll get rid of the STF. I'll go up to the bottom. See what I'm doing here. Oh, I still have the mask applied. Turn off the mask. So typically what I like to do is kind of get a narrow kind of bell-shaped curve a little bit halfway between the 0 and this first line, which is I forget where it is, about 1/8. So about 1/16, about 6%. That's usually kind of where I aim. And I think that does an okay job. Maybe like that. And I apply that. Alright, so this is good for now. What I want to do is go to the RGB image and start working on it. So we have to go through all those steps that we did before for the luminance, the dynamic crop. I want the STF to be unlinked. Unlink the channels, that way you don't get all the green cast. I see these channels are very differently weighted, the red, green, and blue, so this is a quick way to see what's underlying. The first DBE, it has to do all 3 channels, so it takes a little longer. And then the second DBE. Okay, and then I'm pretty much done with that. Okay, so now I want to link the channels, apply, and we still have that green cast. In order to quickly fix that, I just do a background neutralization, see what it looks like, and that's what it looks like. Now, going forward, I want to make the color well balanced, and the way I do that is using photometric color calibration. I apply it with, I look for M63 for the RA deck. So what this does is it looks for the stars that are in this field of view, plate solves it, and then determines which stars are G2V stars, which are like our sun, and then applies the color calibration with reference to that white star. And it does a really good job of it. So you enter in your focal length, pixel size. You can also acquire from image, but I usually do it by hand because sometimes my images, like for example this one, won't have all that data in it. And then the rest I pretty much leave alone. This background neutralization is again the same step that we did with this, but I just like to do that first just to see what I'm working with before applying this. And then apply it to the image. So it's plate solving, it found it, and then it's going to check the stars, fit the stars to a color profile, and then apply it to the image. Okay. So this is the color profile of the different stars it found and how it fits with its expected white balance function. So that's that. And we do an auto STF on this again, and this is, well, it should be well balanced in color. So now we have that. I think the next step is to do a similar stretch. What I usually do, because all the luminance, this is the luminance image, and all the details coming from this, and basically the color is just coming from this. So I want to do a similar stretch on this that I did with Illuminance, just to get them as close as possible. So I want to go to image 8, zoom in there. Turn off the STF. And again, I want that peak to be roughly in the middle between 0 and 1/8, and sort of a similar looking bell curve, about similar width as I had it before. And I think, that might be a little too wide, but maybe back off a little bit. You don't have to get exact with this. Something like that. Apply that. And then these two are not exactly the same in terms of their balance, but pretty close. They're both nonlinear. So this is color, this is luminance. They're both nonlinear, but so what I'm going to do next is actually probably not the best thing to do, but you can use it to apply a luminance to the RGB image and it not throw off the colors like crazy. And that's why I took care in trying to balance those histograms, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the extracted luminance from the color. That's what this button up here did, extract the luminance component, which is this image. So this is the luminance of the RGB image, and then I want to take the luminance that I shot with my luminance filter, and I want to fit this to this. So I use linear fit for that. My reference is from the RGB luminance, and I want to apply it to the integrated luminance. Okay. And so I want to apply this now to effectively replace the luminance that's in the RGB image. So I want to apply it to here. There we go. Okay, so we can do another little stretch just to bring it out a little more. This is already on image 8, so stretch it a little more, something maybe like that. Okay. So right now it looks pretty well muted. What I usually do at this point is bring up the this RGBK channel in curves and find the background. So I click and I kind of hover around to see where the background lives, and then just above the background put a point where the input and output are identical. So the way I can do that is there. Just move that point so that these two are identical, and then I can bring up the rest. So I'm not really affecting the background much. Bring out the core a little bit more, and then you can also work on the saturation. So I like to boost the saturation up a fair bit. Something like this. Okay. Alright, so that's a good starting point. I'm going to check the background again. Since this is the stretched image, we can start to attack more of the background with other methods. I like to use ACDNR for this. Take off the STF. And the cool thing here is that you can play directly with the lightness mask through the preview. I like that a lot. It's kind of nice being able to control that. Move wavelet layers a little bit. So what I'm trying to do is make the galaxy pretty dark so that the noise reduction doesn't apply much to it. And then everywhere else outside of that halo I want to be have noise reduction applied to it. And I get pretty aggressive with noise reduction, so 3 and 4 are the standard deviation values for the lightness and chrominance. And so I can take a look at what this does. So turning on and off ACDNR, so I turn right now it's on, turn it off, and you see a lot of the color noise and the in the luminance too. Turn it on and off, and you see it really kind of flattens that out. Near the brighter spiral arms of the galaxy, it's not as aggressive. So there's still a little bit of noise left in that transition zone. So if we want, we can go back and look at how the lightness mask is, and then maybe lighten that up a little bit. We want to protect the core of the galaxy, but we want to apply more noise reduction to these outer bands. So I'll turn off the preview, and it's still kind of speckled there, so at this point maybe adjusting these directly just to see what it looks like. I want to go this way. Yeah. Alright, full preview, just to see what that looks like. Yeah. Yeah, let's just try that. Apply it. Okay. Alright, so not so bad. So what that does is it really tightens up the bottom end of that histogram, so we can bring that slider pretty close to the base of the histogram without clipping anything. And that's one of the great things about noise reduction, is you can start to get to the floor of the image with these sliders. So, all right, it's okay. We can just mild stretch for that. And now what I usually do at this point is isolate the galaxy or nebula or whatever I'm working on separate from the stars. And again, I go back to StarNet, and I want to apply it on this. And what this is going to do is it's just going to give me a galaxy-only image. So I want to do that to a clone of this. So I'm going to call this M63 original, just LRGB. And then this one will be the starless version. Starless. So we apply it to here to remove all those stars. Okay, so we have the starless now. And what we're going to do is subtract the starless from this to create the star version. So $T is target, and then starless is already named. So we apply this to this image that says that this image minus starless is our result. And we want to create a new image, not rescaling, to make sure that we're at the same level of brightness as the starless image. So this is the image with just stars. So I'll call it that, and put that over here. And then now we can work independently on this image and not have to worry about stars. One thing I like to do here is a couple things. One, if I feel like I could increase the saturation of the galaxy a little more versus the stars, then I can start to look at that. I think the saturation is already kind of pretty well, maybe hit its peak, maybe a tiny boost. And then another thing I want to do is apply HDR transformation on it to kind of put more definition in the arms. But I don't want to go 100%. So what I do with that is create a clone, apply it at layer 6. Usually layer 5 or 6 is what I apply it at, and that'll define these arms pretty well. But in my opinion, I just think it's a bit too strong. So what I want to do is average between this image, the original starless, and the HDR starless. So I want to create a new image. Plus starless times 1 minus A. And then A I'll define as 0.5. So I will apply that. And so this is a 50-50 blend. I can also, if I want to be more aggressive, I can bring this up to be a 70-30 blend. And then maybe the other way, a 30-70 blend. Okay, so now I have 3 different images. What I usually do is kind of toggle between the 50-50 and one of the others, see which one I like best. So that's 30-70, 50-50. I think 50-50 looks better. And then the other one is 70-30 and 50-50. Yeah, 70-30 is not bad. So, okay, we'll say that the 70-30 is the one I'll keep. Get rid of some of these images. So 70-30 is the one I'll keep. So this is the original starless, and then this is the 70-30. Alright, so the next thing is pretty easy. Stars plus $T, just to put the stars back. And there's the final image. And yeah, I think that's that kind of summarizes most of what I do with these images. A lot of times I'll just take a little bit more care in finding the right settings and things. But yeah, if you have any questions, feel free to let me know. Thanks.